This is Resolute and the Resolute Podcast. My name is Vince Miller, your founder and host, and today we're in a series that we have entitled From Addiction to Freedom. Today's topic is insecurity. Welcome back to the program. If this is your first time tuning in, well, thank you for joining us. Our mission as Resolute is to disciple and develop men to lead. If you're looking for content for your men's group or men's ministry out there, then you need to go to our website today at beresolute.org. We have numerous great tools for men who are leading other men, including a number of new small group series that we know that you would love to have for your men's group. Visit us today. And now, gentlemen, let's dive in. Well, I'm joined again by Joel Carlson, good friend of mine, who has been making his way over the last couple of years from addiction to recovery, addiction to restoration, and addiction to healing in his own life. I have been very moved by this man's dedication, both to Christ and to his freedom in Christ. And he said some words that were very powerful to me, and I want to welcome Joel to the show one more time.
Thank you, Vince. Good to be here.
So we are in this series, and we're trying to help guys move from addiction to freedom, addiction to recovery, addiction to healing. And the words you've spoken to me are unforgettable. 8 words that I believe can move men from here to there, and they are, I can't, he can, and I'm going to let him. The words we're focusing on now are he can, because we do believe, even though I can't, God really can, Joel. And I have seen it in your life, and I have seen it in my own life, and I believe men want to see it in his life. And the topic today that we're focusing in on is insecurity. It's this idea that we are in some state frame of mind insecure men, right? I know that at some point I am, and I know that you've experienced moments in your life where you are. Once you have recognized that insanity that we talked about last time in your life, what steps did you take to begin the process of believing God could restore you? How does insecurity play a role in that?
Well, insecurity in my life was huge. And the question I had to ask myself, and what I would ask the listeners too, is what is the thing that's at your core? What's driving your life? If it's not the Lord that's driving your life, what is it? For me, it was a deep, deep insecurity that was really known to me, but something that was really, really tough for me to handle.
Okay, let me interrupt you. So I love this part because this is where guys need to hear your level of transparency, right? So you're saying there were some things that you needed to hear, but they weren't just stop behaving this way in your business and stop behaving this way with alcohol, which is where we tend to go, right? It's like our friends, our family members, even ourselves, we think if we can fix this behavior, we fix everything. Yep. And I think you're starting to allude to the fact that there was something deeper driving the alcoholism that was leading to the criminal behavior, right? Yeah. And you're suggesting it was a deep insecurity?
Absolutely. It was a deep insecurity. That was what was driving my life. And when I hit my rock bottom, when I had that porch overlooking at the pond moment where all I could think about was a drink was going to get me through each day, and I recognized I couldn't do this on my own, I checked into a treatment center down in southwestern Minnesota, and one of my favorite movies is Field of Dreams. And if you've seen that movie, you know it takes place in Iowa, in the cornfields. And I love that movie. I get to this treatment center. It's in the middle of nowhere. In the backyard of this treatment center is all cornfields.
Really?
And I thought, this is a fitting place for me to be.
Was Kevin Costner back there too?
No, he wasn't, but I was looking for a baseball game while I was there. That would have been perfect. You know, the beautiful thing about that, though, is I could already feel God pulling the insecurity out of me and putting himself into the center of my life. And this treatment center, very small, But a lot of staff that gave the clients a lot of focus was a perfect place for me because they dug deep into who I was. And I learned, as you said, while my behavior was terrible and destructive, it really wasn't the real reason why I had become who I had become.
Right.
It was a more deeper character issue.
Okay, so this is important, Joel. I think this is super important that men hear this from you because this is the most clarifying. Sometimes we focus on alcoholism, and really the problem isn't alcoholism. That's just a behavior or a symptom of a deeper problem. You are turning to a bottle, okay, out of an insecurity. Can you just say real quick, what was that insecurity?
The insecurity was that I never measured up to other people, that I expected myself to be a certain person with certain income levels, with certain things, with the perfect family. I had to look a certain way. I had to have that perfect image. And I constantly felt like I was never living up to what other people wanted me to be. Or when I looked at my friends and family, I kept telling myself, they're so much better than me. How can I get to that point?
Okay, so
Just drove me.
That is so good. Thank you for being honest because, Joel, every man out there, including myself, has these private thoughts. Right. But I think what's important to note is these private thoughts are so powerful that they led to the criminal behavior that you engaged in inside of your organization, right? You did all those things to kind of manufacture an identity.
Absolutely.
Right? And you did all those things to really try to manufacture an image for yourself that made you feel good so that you could feel good when you looked at other people or talked to other people or engaged in other people. It's funny the things we do with these deep embedded thoughts, right?
Not only am I being a fraud at work and a fraud at home, I'm being a fraud as a person, as a man. It's just not who I am. And the problem with being insecure, I'm not a psychologist, but I know that the problem with being insecure is the way that I would mask my insecurity was with a whole bunch of negative character traits: arrogance, dishonesty, deception, pride. All of these things to make me look better is what drove that insecurity. So that is what was leading my life. And it just allowed me, as I looked at it, to make all of these decisions. Nothing was more important to me than being better than everyone else.
Okay, but let me ask you this, because I know that I've tried to talk to people about issues that they have in life, and sometimes they're just unwilling to change, right? You know what I'm getting at with this,
Absolutely,
right?
yep.
So I can try to tell you from the outside, right, that I see some character faults here because I see these behaviors, because these behaviors are symptoms of character faults. But then I try to tell you about your character faults. I've seen men become very, very defensive of those things, very, very protective, because they're unwilling to open up about the character issues they actually do have. You're talking here about this insecurity. How hard is it to do business with this insecurity?
No, it's incredibly hard. It's an extra job to just to be insecure and to try to live a life that's just not you. The thing that I learned about having a drinking problem and being an alcoholic are one and the same, but also two very different things. If I didn't address the behavior behind the drinking problem, there's a good chance that I could have quit drinking on its own.
Yeah.
But if I had never worked on the behavior side of it, I would honestly be just a real sober jerk.
Yeah, exactly. Good point.
And that's what I had to work on. So
because we're not trying to be sober jerks here. We're trying to really get after the root issues, right?
Right. And the thing that I learned as I went through treatment is that, well, first of all, my biggest fear going into treatment and learning that I had to figure out my character was that, what if we flushed everything out and looked at the character of Joel and then realized that there really wasn't much there that was to be grateful for, that he was still just kind of a jerk. Yeah. But thankfully, after going through it all, I did know that there had always been a kind person there, a friendly, funny, joyful, generous person in there, it had just gotten completely covered up
Yeah.
by these muddy character traits. And it's not easy to do. It's not easy to be honest with who I had become. But thankfully, I knew that there was already someone there that could come out of that. And the only way to do that is to really start being honest with yourself, asking people, what have you seen in me? What has changed in me? Because the reality is I had completely changed from that person that I once was to this person that I wasn't. And now I got back to the person that I am supposed to be. And if I kept that insecurity at the core, I'd still, like I said, be just a sober jerk today.
Yeah, yeah. So now you've done some business with this insecurity piece because you do see a positive trend here in this because you're attaching this to the he can part.
Right.
So it sounds to me like you're saying that you've come to the place where you're now embracing your insecurities. You're saying, this is who I am, right?
Right.
And that is the first step to understanding that God can.
Absolutely.
Right? So just understanding that we do have these insecurities and that we're not perfect people and we don't have everything all put together.
We have to understand that we all have some kind of a deficiency that we have to work through.
And it's unique to every guy.
Absolutely. And so what we have to understand is this going to be something that we're going to try to tackle on our own, that we're going to fight through and be the man about it and say, I can do this. I don't need any help. Or do we recognize there's a greater power that can take care of this and work with us and get us through this? And that's why I like to go from the insanity, the last part of the I can't, and use the word insecurity under the he can, which is definitely a positive thing. But for me, I had to identify that insecurity is what was driving me. But because, as I learned in the step 2 from AA, that I came to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity, which means that I knew that my insecurity was not going to work. But if I got God to get into the center of my life, he is that power. And he is the one that could take away the insanity and get me into a life of sanity.
Yeah, and that's where really insecurity is turned into security. It's not security in ourselves, it's security in him, the he can part, which I just love those two words, he can, because they're very freeing. So I'm looking at a verse for today. It's 1 Samuel 15, verse 24. I'm going to read it a couple times. I think it's just very profound. It says, Then Saul said to Samuel, so this is King Saul saying to Samuel, the prophet, I have sinned. I violated the Lord's command and your instruction. I was afraid of the people, so I gave in to them. Now, we know that Saul was actually a little insane.
Right.
Right? I think it's kind of interesting. And he had glimpses or moments, right? Saul had a few glimpses or moments where he kind of broke free. And I think this is another one of those beautiful moments because we can truly say that probably Saul was a little imbalanced. Saul was a little imbalanced there, and he really needed to come to the end of his insecurity. But he was very insecure, right?
Right.
When David showed up on the scene, and we see this odd behavior out of him, Joel.
Yep.
And he starts this behavior that just doesn't end, that leads to the death of him, right?
That's right.
I am sure that's why you think of this context today. But there is hope in it, right? There are people that want to speak prophetically to us, like the Samuel speaking to Saul's, like the people you had in your life trying to speak to you. And sometimes there's a turn and sometimes there isn't, but we just pray because there's guys out there listening today that are consumed by deception.
That's right.
Right? Consumed by darkness. They are living in insanity because of their insecurity. And if they can just recognize that insecurity, whatever it might be a pride issue, right?
Yep.
It might be a humility issue.
Yep.
It might be a secret sin. It might be a dishonesty. It might be a character trait or behavior that goes so deep. If we can just come to our senses with that and recognize that look, it's not about me here. It's not about what I need. This symptom is a deeper problem. I need to give that up, and I need to turn my insecurity into his security for me, that maybe God would do something amazing.
And the beautiful thing about this for me, and my encouragement to all of the listeners out there, is that we are imperfect people. We can always improve. But what we have to understand is that we have to come to the point of recognizing that we are not in control. And that's a good thing. And that's the thing that I learned, is that once I was able to flush out the character traits of my insecurity, I'm not going to lie to you, the insecurity in me is still there. But I've been able to give that over to God and say, Lord, please take this feeling away from me. Fill me with your peace. Fill me with your hope, which we're going to talk about soon. It's a whole different perspective. It then transformed me into doing things that are more positive. The people that know me today know the real me.
Yeah.
And this is what this verse is so telling to me, is that I was afraid of the people, and so I gave in to them. That was me. I was so afraid of disappointing people, so I chose to become who I wasn't. When the reality was when I became the person I wasn't, that's when I disappointed all these people. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't doing anything to please the Lord or to please my family or the people most close to me, because I was so deeply rooted in that insecurity.
Well, and I got to tell you, every man out there, whether he wants to admit it or not, has an insecurity. It's the man who thinks he's got everything all put together that concerns me. Right?
That was me.
That is a guy we should be concerned about.
That's right.
It's the leader we follow who pretends like he's got his life all together.
Right.
I mean, we should be very concerned about that man, for his fall will be great someday.
Absolutely.
But it's a guy who really embraces his insecurity. I mean, I've got insecurities. I share with the guys all the time about my anxiety issues. I have anxiety issues because I want to control things. Mm-hmm. And I want to control things because I want to be the man. That's right? But as soon as I start admitting that I've got anxiety issues that stem from my need to control certain situations, right?
Yep.
I start to admit, man, that's my weak spot. And I can't let Satan have my weak spot. I got to let the world know about it so that I don't fall into deception of myself. Mm-hmm. And so insecurity is a great place to be if we can just encourage guys to move there. So guys, here's my challenge to you today as we close off this podcast. Embrace your insecurity like Joel has. Embrace it. Don't be ashamed of it. Don't hide it. Don't conceal it. Don't run from it. And definitely don't let Satan deceive you into concealing it deeper and driving it deeper and deeper by concealing it behind character traits that are unhonoring to God. Like, give it over. Sit down with a guy this week and talk with him about the things that you're insecure about. It might be the hardest conversation that you ever have in your life, and here's why: because you've probably never done it before. When is the last time you've talked to another guy privately, inside the confines of a safe conversation, talk about the things that you're insecure about, and to share with him the challenges you face because of that? There's your trigger, and there's the problem. Well, Joel, thanks again for being with the show. We look forward to future podcasts with you.
Thank you so much, Vince.
As we close, I want to remind you that we have great content for your men's group on our website. Excellent small group videos and participant handbooks that will empower the men around you, the men that you lead, the men in your church, the men in someone's church that you know. Check them all out at beresolute.org, or if you like, you can just send me a direct email at info@beresolute.org. And if you do, you send me a personal email, I will give you a trial membership so that you can give it a spin with the men that you lead. And as I say, I hope you enjoyed this podcast today, but please know that the time that we spent together is worthless unless you choose to act on it. Act on it. So do something today out of that sense of insecurity. Be secure in Christ by getting off the bench and into the game with Him. And I will see you right back here next time on the Resolute Podcast.